My last video was all about why you want to start your real estate investing adventure with just one rental at a time. And that's because you are going to make some mistakes. This video is all about the mistakes I made in my first property. And we have returned to the scene of the crime to talk about it. So let's get started. Hi y'all. Thanks so much for stopping back by to hang out for a few minutes. If this is the first time we've met, then welcome. My name is Lori Ligers, and I'm a real estate investor. In just under 3 years, I was able to create enough cash flow to leave my 9-to-5 behind. And this has been an amazing experience for me because it allows me to live the life I want to live and not the life I thought I had to live. So let's talk about all the rookie mistakes I made in my very first property. We are here in my first house, the scene of the crime, so to speak. The house is unexpectedly vacant right now. I apologize for the echoey sound. The tenants that have been living in the house unfortunately decided to get divorced, and neither one of them could afford to stay in the house on their own, so they moved out last weekend. I have new tenants moving in this weekend. So this gave me the perfect opportunity to return to the scene of the crime and confess all the mistakes I made right here in my very first property. Now, the very first mistake I made in this property is that I paid about $12,000 too much for this house to start with. This house had holes in it. And I'm not talking about little holes in the drywall, because it had that too. But this house had big holes in the exterior walls of the house. This house had holes in it. And I didn't get the price of the house discounted enough to cover the cost of repairing those holes. I thought I did, but I was wrong, because I didn't know how much things should cost yet. Another reason I paid way too much for this house to start with is that the roof was in rough shape. And I did not get the house discounted enough to cover the cost of replacing the roof. This house is located in an area that does regularly get hurricanes, and as such, the building codes require additional reinforcement to the roof to protect the house from the hurricanes. But I didn't include this additional reinforcement cost and what I thought the roof was going to cost, and I didn't get the house discounted enough to cover the cost of replacing the roof. So for those two reasons alone, I paid too much for this house right up front. Hey, please do hit that like button down below if you can appreciate me confessing all of my sins and telling you about all the mistakes I made right here in my very first property. And I'll tell you even more because unfortunately, we're just getting started. So the second mistake I made in buying this house right up front was in the hard money loan terms, because I did use hard money to purchase this house. Now, obviously, I knew hard money loans are expensive short-term loans, and so I expected a higher interest rate. But I paid 9.9% interest on the hard money loan that I used to buy this house. And then I later found out that somebody in my particular circumstance should have only paid 6.9% interest on that same loan. So I paid 3 points too high on a hard money loan right up front when I bought this house. Now, the third mistake I made here in this property is that I paid $15,000 too little for my rehab. That's right, I didn't pay enough for my rehab. I did not address all the things I should have. I did what I thought would be good enough until the house made me a little bit of money, and I was wrong. The inspection report I got on this house said that the roof would last me another 1 to 3 years. So I didn't replace it right up front, thinking I had a little bit of time. And then we had a storm hit the area. And guess what? The crappy roof leaked in a really big way, causing all kinds of damage to the inside of the house. Now, if I would have just handled my rehab properly and replaced the roof right up front, that would have never happened. The other big mistake that I went with when I did the rehab of this house is that I went with a cheap contractor. And let me promise you, cheap contractors do cheap work. And cheap work gets real expensive real fast. Within the first 90 days, I started having all kinds of problems with the rehab stuff that the contractor had done. And guess what? They were nowhere to be found. So I spent the next several months making repairs to their shoddy work that I never should have even allowed to happen in the first place. Now, these were not big, expensive repairs, but it was one little irritating thing after another, after another, after another, and all of those things add up. Not spending the money I needed to spend on my rehab up front led to another big problem. And that problem is that my appraisal for my refi loan came in short. So when I was getting my long-term conventional loan to get out of my hard money loan, the appraisal value came in short. And this meant I had to bring cash to close on my long-term loan. And that's cash I should have put into the house right up front. But because I had taken shortcuts where I shouldn't have, I was having to put that money towards the loan. Had I spent that money up front in that rehab, then my appraisal would have come in on track and I wouldn't have had to bring cash to that refi. But I didn't. I took the shortcuts. I went with a cheap contractor who did cheap work, and I didn't make sure I addressed all the important things up front. So my appraisal came in short and I had to put that money towards my loan. Now, while all of this is awful, it's not even the worst part. If you can imagine, it gets even worse. All of these mistakes I had made in my rehab process led to real issues for the first tenants that I had move into this house. Let me promise you, you do not want to spend your property management learning curve apologizing for all the things that you did not do right up front. So when the first several issues came up pretty quick, one after another, when they first moved in, I just asked them if I could meet with them and decided I was just going to be completely honest and transparent with them. I explained the mistakes I had made and apologized for the inconvenience and the irritation that they were suffering for it. I even offered to let them out of their lease. But this couple was so very kind and understanding. They didn't want to move. They just needed all of these little irritating things to be fixed so that they could live comfortably. I could not have ever have asked, or never would I expect such kindness and understanding. And I don't even have the words to describe how very grateful I am to have had this couple as my first tenants. As you can imagine, this was an incredibly humiliating experience, but it's one you learn a lot from. And I can promise you, I have never repeated these mistakes. So to sum up all of these mistakes, I need to tell you that I made absolutely no money on this house for 17 months. In fact, I lost $3,000 on this house the first 90 days that I had tenants in it. What should have been clear cash flow right up front was eaten up in high interest rates that I never should have even paid for hard money financing. And all of the rest of the profit for 17 months was eaten up by making repairs for things that I should have addressed before a tenant ever even moved in my rehab process. So I made no money on this house for 17 months. Now here's the thing. All of these mistakes are very, very normal rookie investor mistakes. And I think this is exactly why there are so many horror stories about owning rental properties. I am so lucky and grateful that I started with just one rental at a time, because this gave me the time I needed to learn from my mistakes so that I have not repeated them. So let me tell you where I am on this house now, almost 3 years later. It has appreciated over $40,000 in that 3 years. So that's a great thing. And since I spent that first several months redoing everything that I should have done right in the first place, the house has made about $7,500 in free and clear cash flow each year. In addition to that, this house is an ideal property. It draws a ton of potential tenants when I list it for rent, and it rents very quickly. So those are both great things. Now, the only reason I was able to overcome all of these rookie mistakes that I made is simply time. If you are a long-term buy and hold rental property investor, time is almost always on your side. Because if you can hold a cash flowing property long enough to get out from under your mistakes, then you're going to be just fine. But let's be real clear here. Try not to make these mistakes in the first place. Now, the good thing for me is that these mistakes are behind me. I learned a lot of hard lessons, and I have taken this experience into all my other deals that have gone very, very well for me. And I am really looking forward to telling you all about those success stories so that you can see that real estate investing, passive income is a fantastic option for people who want to live full-time off passive income. Please do hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the success stories as well. Luckily for me, there's a whole lot more success stories. Otherwise, I would still be a bean counting accountant, trading time for money, working for somebody else, so bored out of my mind that I want to poke my own eyes out. But instead, I am a successful real estate investor that has time to make YouTube videos. I learned so much from this very first cash flowing property that I started my real estate investing portfolio with, because experience is the very best teacher. And I'm so glad I started with one rental at a time. Had I just run out and bought up a whole bunch of properties and got started with a whole bunch of rentals all at once, I probably would have magnified these mistakes and really overextended myself trying to get out from under them. And I am damn glad that didn't happen. Right now, I am waiting for you in this video on your screen right here. Let's hang out for a few more minutes. What do you think? Until I see you over there. Bye, y'all.